Okay, so welcome back to our panelists who we have been working tremendously hard. So we'll have a great opportunity tonight to celebrate with them. We wanted you all to have an opportunity to ask your questions to our experts. So thank you so much for submitting your questions. The first question we have from our members is, how does your country ensure that persons with lived experience who are engaging with policymakers or engaging with researchers are compensated for their valuable time?
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. So in Malta, I can use the example of the Autism Advisory Council, which I discussed earlier, and also Engage, which, as I had mentioned, is the civil society mechanism through which all policies and laws for the disability sector must be passed before they actually go to the Cabinet of Ministers. So what we have, there's an overall structure which is set by the Cabinet Office in Malta, whereby ex officio members, members who are not ex officio, are remunerated by the hour for the participation in the boards and committees. So ex officio, the ones who are not ex officio, it means that they are the ones who are not there by virtue of their position. So let's say somebody's on a board because they represent a ministry. They're already receiving a remuneration because they have their salary through the ministry. So they would not be paid extra for that. But in Malta, it is a general rule that with every government board, especially these two boards where you have representation of disabled people, there is an hourly rate which is fixed. So these people are remunerated through that. And you have different categories for boards, A, B, and C. And both boards where you have disability matters being discussed are rated as category A. So people on that board receive the highest form of compensation.
Thank you.
Yes, in the United States, the federal government has a daily honorarium for people that are involved in our meetings. And so if we have a 2-day meeting, they receive 2 days worth of honoraria, or if it's a 2-hour meeting, they receive 1 day's worth of honorarium.
It's wonderful.
In Norway, it's actually based on loss of income. So if you spend a day in a meeting, you get compensated for the lost revenue that you've actually had for that day. Hold your jubilee down. That it's beautiful in words, not necessarily the way it works all together. What is good though is that it is the NGOs who's responsible for ensuring that the right people get their say. So it's not as if somebody says, we want to hear your story. Is we as an autism society tells you, you need to listen to these people. So we get to pick the worst stories to bring in front of the policymakers. But generally it is, you get remunerated for the time that you're away from work.
Thank you so much. You know, it's often debated in Canada how we ensure the mechanisms that we appropriately remunerate persons with lived experience for their very important opinions, experiences, and contributions. So the next question is a really great one. How do national autism strategies dismantle stigma and barriers which are at the root of autistic people's challenges?
Okay, so I'll be very blunt on this. National autism strategies do not dismantle stigma and barriers. It's people that actually do that. So, okay, I mean, I know it like might sound kind of a bit too much saying this, but still, okay, with national autism strategy, you're putting a direction, writing, you're actually setting out specific actions as to how to do it. But then again, it's all about how to engage people, how to make things work. That's why earlier I also said it's important to actually have a strategy that's workable, where the stakeholders have ownership, and that's like simple enough to be able to follow. Because yes, awareness and outreach to be able to combat stigma, That's important. In fact, it's in chapter 1 of the multi-essential autism strategy. But if you don't have the right approach, if you don't have the right people on board doing the training and outreach, don't have the right people on board receiving this training and outreach, then it's useless. So I would say it's nice having the strategy, but it's not about the strategy. It's about how far you make the strategy workable. And that's very important. So it has to be at the design stage.
So while I believe the strategic plan plays a role in breaking down stigma, I think even more importantly, having the committee that we have and the representation that's there and people actually listening to our meetings because they're all open to the public and hearing from individuals who have a variety of different challenges and abilities, seeing how they all can contribute. I think that is more destigmatizing than the actual writing on paper and putting people out in front of the public to be able to see that we can all work together and that people, no matter what their abilities or disabilities are, can contribute in a meaningful way.
I'd say that it doesn't fight stigma. It's left up to the autism societies to do that. And the best way to do that, in my mind, is to combat stereotyping, preconceived notion. And we've come a long way. I mean, 20 years ago, everybody thought of people with autism as Rain Man. That doesn't happen anymore. Our biggest challenge is actually not to fight stigma in the legislative arenas or in the services, but actually in the press. Arresting people that bring forward stereotype approaches or stereotype understanding of autism. When something happens and somebody trying to make a story with the fact that this person was on the spectrum, it is our job as an autism society to turn around and say, sorry, guys, you need to tell the right story. You need to retract what you actually wrote and acknowledge that there's no scientific proof for what you're saying. And we managed to do that with newspapers. And it's pretty tough to get a newspaper to retract a story. But we managed to do it. So a strong autism organization like the Alliance is needed. You need to be the watchdog.
Thank you so much for that and for the call to action for all of us in this room to think about how the media plays a role in that stigmatization. So the next question is about mental health. We talk a lot about mental health. How do your national autism strategies support mental health and the genuine well-being of autistic people on the ground?
Okay, so first and foremost, there is the chapter on health. Mental health does fall within the wider remit of health, especially that in Malta, although disability falls within the portfolio of the Inclusion Ministry, mental health still falls within the remit of the Health Ministry. So it starts from a very young age. There is the directive to streamline all different services that are offered from the point of diagnosis through to early intervention and support. And we're actually implementing this through a one-stop shop, a pediatric one-stop shop, whereby you have diagnostic facilities, but also what's called CIPS, Children and Young People Services, which are psychiatric and psychological services. So also supporting people's mental health and well-being. Going forward, it does mention that all services have to be age appropriate and also, for example, gender sensitive. Then again, there are more challenges here because there's still a lot of silos in this respect. And then again, the strategy provides the basis for this, but the aim is to use the strategy as a basis to take the model that was used for pediatric mental health and mental well-being, and also extend this to other age cohorts and cover the lifespan of a person, as the autism covers the strategy has a lifespan approach. So it can be like from let's say, young age through to old age. So that is the plan. How long it will take, we'll actually see.
So mental health has always been a part of our strategic plan. In 2018 and 19, the IACC discussed physical and mental health conditions that impact individuals on the autism spectrum, and we had a special workshop on that topic. And it's been worked into the new strategic plan, and mental health was one of the areas of emphasis that the committee decided to focus on in the new strategic plan. And we have, of course, the National Institute of Mental Health is involved in our work, as well as the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Agency.
One of the difficult things when you're talking to people in terms of the legislative bodies is they need data in order to move. You can't get politicians to move unless you can point to data. So the concept of autism and mental health has appeared on the radar now. So now we're starting to see that data, and it becomes easier to engage in the discussions like that. I think the general acceptance of neurodiversity in the broad sense is helping that, and recognizing that there is a lot of mental health issues within the neurodiversity scene. So right now, nothing has been generated out of that, but with everything else, there's a growing understanding that we need to do something about it. And then I guess also a growing willingness to discuss it, which is the first step.
Thank you. And you touched upon the importance of data to move policy or to inform policy. So the next question follows really nicely. How is research and data integrated into the work that you do?
So one of the elements which our National Autism Strategy mentions is the importance of research at different levels, be it academic research or else, for example, disaggregation of statistics to be able to assist in furthering the aims of the strategy. Now, when actually we do speak about research, we also qualify this because, for example, when it actually comes to data, we all know that if you have prevalence data as regards autism, it was one of the big discussions in the run-up things. What are we going to use this data for? Why do we need to know the autism figures? So we actually mentioned specifically that this data, okay, it is not tabulated like in Malta so far. So we are actually working on a centralized system for prevalence, but that this data will actually be used to give a better overview when it actually comes to designing services in response to kind of the current service needs that there are. So on the one hand, you have the figures that you need, but it's all about how they are used. On the other hand, you also have specific research. For example, there's research going on with the University of Malta when it comes to transition like into education, similar to what's actually happening in Canada, what we heard about yesterday. So it's very important because there you actually have, if it's done in an emancipatory and participatory way, you have the voices of disabled people, of autistic people, and they're being used not only to shape policy, but to help drive forward policy.
Thank you.
So with our strategic plan, can you remind me the question again, the way you worded it?
Sure. Yeah. I said, how is research and data integrated into your work?
Yes, so our strategic plan is based on research, or it initially was, as I mentioned, in 2009, the first strategic plan in the law said that it was to be a research strategic plan, but it's evolved over time to incorporate more on services and supports. And so research continues to be a strong component, and we have a very robust portfolio of research going on that's funded by the US government as well as funded by private organizations. So this is still an important emphasis of our work.
Thank you.
Okay, Norway has a central body for health-related research known as the National Health Institute. Their charged with any type of statistics on any type of disability. So there is a substantial amount of data available. One of the, I think, first of all, we got to recognize that in Norway, nothing happens without the data. So it's at the basis of whatever you do. And understanding which areas that they should try and investigate and get data from is one of the key things that we need to focus on.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to our panelists for being here and for answering questions. We're going to segue into an opportunity for you all to roll up your sleeves again and do a little bit of thinking. We really want to ensure that your voices as members of the Alliance are being brought forth to decision makers and get your input on what Canada can do next.